Hello, everyone, and welcome to another webinar here with the CASW. Again, like always, I am so happy you are joining us today. It's a rainy, kind of cloudy day in Ottawa, and so it's a nice feeling to be inside and be ready to tackle some amazing ideas of nature. I do know that the world has its own way of showing us what it likes to do, and so I'm happy to be here and have a bit of a rainy day to discuss nature. I hope that wherever you are and wherever you're at, that you can look outside and know that this conversation about nature and social work and the counseling world and the therapeutic relationships that we have will translate to our practice and hopefully to our personal selves as well. So thank you so much for coming. My name is Alexandra Zanis. I'm the Social Policy and Communications Coordinator here at the Canadian Association of Social Work. I run all of our policy and communications and webinars. So if you're new to this platform, it's nice to meet you. Please engage with us in the question and answer section and let us know where you're coming from, what you do. I'd love to hear more about the work that you're doing. So quickly, before I introduce our amazing webinar presenter, I'm so excited for this webinar today, and we're so lucky to be joined by an incredible presenter. Before I get into that, of course, we'll do a couple little housekeeping notes, just making sure that if you need that certificate of attendance, it is the yellow widget at the bottom. You need to attend about 40 minutes of the presentation to qualify for that. If you have any issues with it, note that you will be able to log on after the presentation has concluded and get your certificate of attendance if you weren't able to get it during the live presentation. As always, we encourage you to engage with us on either social media, so by Twitter or by our question and answer box at the bottom. Please engage throughout the presentation, and I will compile all questions and comments for a formal Q&A at the end with our presenter. So don't worry about waiting till the end. You can type your questions throughout the whole presentation. I think that's pretty much it, aside from the fact that if you are new, note that our platform is totally customizable, so you can make some things bigger, some things smaller. You can make the slides bigger, make us smaller, play around with it and really make sure that it fits your viewing needs. Again, as always, I want to note that we have launched a peer-to-peer support group on Facebook for social workers who would like to engage and share their stories and their expertise as they start to adapt to these unconventional ways of practice. We know all of you are working very, very, very hard in situations that you've never necessarily had to work in before, although we know you are great at working in crisis. Take a look at that peer-to-peer support group and help share your stories and your expertise with other social workers who are in the midst of this as well. If you request with us, I will try and approve you during this conversation. That's a nice little online community that we have hopefully created for you. So please take advantage of it and comment and type in your questions and whatnot. Okay. With all that being said, I am going to launch into our incredible webinar we have today. Nature is Nurture Counseling and the Natural World. We are joined by Dr. Megan Delaney. Megan Delaney is an assistant professor at the Department of Professional Counseling at Monmouth University in West Long Branch, New Jersey, USA. Her research explores the influence of natural world on mental health and the use of ecotherapy in clinical practice. Trained in outdoor education through the National Outdoor Leadership School, Dr. Delaney spent 7 years as a wilderness instructor with troubled teens. Today, she infuses ecotherapy in her private practice and in her counseling classroom. Dr. Delaney's book, Nature is Nurture, Counseling in the Natural World, is published at Oxford University Press. And actually, if you participated in our book draw during National Social Work Month, Dr. Delaney's book was in our book draw, so somebody won it, and I do think that they may be on this presentation. So cool. Let us know. Oh, right? I got to skim through it and read it. I have to say it was incredible. We have included it in the resource section, so take a look. Dr. Delaney, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so
excited.
Kind of
overcast here too in New Jersey.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit all around Canada. My family from out west was saying it was a little bit gross today too. So looks like that.
I know. Yeah. I know. Well, thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. I know we talked about doing this so long ago, and the world has changed since then. And we're all adapting in our own ways. And I think there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty and for me personally, like nature has become a real respite from my own place and space here in our house. And so my family and I get some chances to go outside and take some walks in nature and you know, in a way, and I was thinking about this the other day, I think all of us are kind of like missing that social connection. And I've noticed on my walks in nature recently that people have been, this is New Jersey in the United States, and nobody really talks to each other. It's like, so like, that's not what we do here in New Jersey. And I've noticed that people are like making eye contact and saying hello. And so I think in a way, even though we keep, you know, our distance, we are connecting that way a little bit outside. So, but I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to talk about what I love to do and what I love to teach, and what I think that probably a lot of the people who are listening today are probably doing in some capacity in their own way. And so we'll talk about that. Amazing. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to just see, I'm going to flip through my slides. Good. Everything's working? Good. Okay. So for me personally, I grew up with two teachers as parents, and every summer we went camping. We spent a couple of summers on cross-country trips in a van that a little PTSD with my brother, but other than that, we got to drive across the United States, and we saw a lot of Canada as well. And those are some of the most memorable pieces of my childhood. And so I just want the audience to think about, you know, our own connection to nature, and think about their earliest experiences with nature, memories that might invoke, and particular feelings that come to mind when you might think about nature, and what you kind of think about the natural world as a place to go and find, kind of answer the question. And so for me, those are a lot of the questions that I ask new clients. It brings up a lot of stories. It brings up a lot of childhood memories. Sometimes they're not good. Sometimes they're great. For some people, nature was a respite for them from a chaotic home, or it might have been the only place that they felt calm. For others, it was a place for connection. Maybe they would go to the park with their extended family and be able to see their aunts and uncles and cousins. And so, you know, all of us in our own way have a connection to nature. And I know Canada in particular is just full of beautiful natural places. And I'm sure so many of you, you know, have some of those dear and close to you and important to you. I love Mary Oliver. She's a beautiful poet. And I love this quote: "Hello, sun in my face. Hello, you who made the morning and spread it over the fields. Watch now for a high start the day in happiness and kindness." So what I'm going to talk a little bit about today is ecotherapy, or what we call applied ecopsychology. And to get a feel for kind of ecotherapy, we think about questions that connect us to kind of the bigger picture, and not just, you know, our own little space, but, you know, how much are we approaching the limit of the number of people we can support on the earth? Like a tree can be part of a forest. Do we feel embedded in the broader natural world? Have you walked barefoot in a wild area, or you hunted or fished, or maybe you've gardened your own food? Do you think about climate change and global warming and the things that are kind of impacting our everyday lives on a micro and macro level? Are you worried about risks to human health from environmental pollution? Have you gone out and explored natural places? Have you composted? Have you thought about how you conserve food or energy? And these are the things that we think about when we think about kind of like the impact of all those concepts on our own mental health. So we'll talk about like eco grief and climate stress in a little bit. But ecotherapy and applied ecopsychology was really kind of created. I mean, this is not created, and certainly indigenous people have been living in commune with the natural world forever and ever and ever. But for a lot of us who have lost touch with kind of how the natural world works, we're kind of lost that connection to nature. And in 1995, a group of psychotherapists and thinkers and historians and eco-activists kind of came together to think about this idea. I think at first they were going to call it psychoecology, and they thought maybe that didn't sound so good. So they went with eco-psychology. I don't know if that's true. That's like an urban legend I hear in the field, but it's kind of a funny joke. Yeah, right, psychoecology. Yeah. Actually, Theodore Roszak is one of the, he was actually a historian, and he brought all these different people together to think about, in this book that they published called Eco-Psychology, Restoring the Earth, Healing the Mind, was one of the first in the scholarly world to really talk about kind of all these different connections between the human world and the natural world, which really shouldn't be disconnected or should be at one. And so that's one of the, and there's other books that are out there for sure. Radical Eco-Psychology is written by a man named Andy Fisher, who's Canadian actually. And there's other books since then that have thought about that. And then people have been writing about ecofeminism. Again, we'll talk about that. So eco-psychology is basically kind of the intrinsic connection between the health of the planet with the mental health and physical health of humanity, right? Both individually and collectively. Another book kind of written around this time was written by Howard Kleinbell, who is a therapist, and his book was called Ecotherapy, actually. And he really talked about this idea of the ecological circle, which is really important in our work, especially when we start to shift our language. So we might say, well, what does the natural world give to you, or what do you take from it? And so that's the language we're trying to shift from in terms of thinking about reciprocity, and that when we get nurtured by nature, but then the important thing is to give back and to nurture nature as well, have it be this like full ecological circle. And he talked about, Kleinbell talked a lot about that. He talked about these three concepts called in-reach, up-reach, and outreach. And so he would say that in-reach means opening ourselves to be more intentionally nurtured by nature. Up-reach means referring to the energizing kind of spiritual awareness that can motivate and empower us to engage in difficult tasks of what he calls outreach, which is participating with others in action that help to save the planet, actions that's kind of essential aspects of the holistic kind of contextualized therapy and education we'll describe in this presentation. And so that's what he talked about in an ecological circle. So there's tons of research happening. It's really exciting in this field. And a lot of the research has supported the natural world in being so beneficial to our own physical health, our mental health, occupational function, how we work, which has shifted, how maybe we view our office spaces. I don't know about you guys, but I used to work in a cubicle with no windows, and I didn't know at the time, but I was super depressed by that. Like, I just felt like a caged animal in my cubicle, even with putting up, pictures and plants and whatever, just not, it wasn't a good space for me. That's why I teach outside all the time. I try not to be inside as much as I possibly can. But the research does support just all of these. There's so much exciting research basically is going on out there that, making our spaces more natural friendly, giving ourselves this time to go outside. They're saying as little as 5 minutes in nature makes you feel better, boosts all of the important cortisol and things in your brain that helps you concentrate, be more creative. And so that's all this exciting research that's happening. We know it's great for kids. And we'll talk about that too. So lots of exciting, fun research. One of my favorite places to go to look at kind of new research being done in the field is the Children and Nature Network. And that's Richard Lou's organization. And Richard Lou wrote the book, Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. And he and his team has put together a terrific organization. And you can go on their website and you can look at research articles. You can look at activities and ideas. So it's a great resource. And I'm going to use the next two slides actually are theirs, which I love. It's just like a wonderful, what do they call it, a infographic about all the benefits, especially for kids, that nature has been shown to do for us in terms of, say, maternal health, fetal growth, healthier birth weights for kids, for mothers that are take time in nature, healthy eye and vitamin D levels, increased physical activity, and social emotional well-being. So spending time in nature, all research supports all of these things. Also, academic performance and attention span. So there's been studies done on that. It increases focus and attention, and being in nature or being exposed to nature, even learning in nature or having time to have a break in nature. One of the frustrating things I found in my own children's school is, here in the United States, there was a real push for, this standardized testing, and the first thing to go was recess. And slowly that's coming back, which is so great. I think they're finally figuring out through this research too that kids just concentrate better and have less attention difficulties when they're given the time to be outside and be in the natural world. So all these wonderful things I noticed myself, and I teach I teach in a professional counseling program, and I do teach ecotherapy, which I'll talk about some research I've done in that, but I take my classes outside as when I can. Of course, now we're all virtual, but I make them sit outside. When it's nice, they have to take their computers outside and they have to sit outside with me. But for the most part, I try to teach class outside. And it's kind of an interesting thing, and I've started to do some research around it myself, but my students are a lot more engaged. They're not looking at their computers. They don't tend to engage in other kind of digital things, whether it's their phone or whatever. We have healthier discussions. We sit in a circle. We usually get interrupted by deer or bird or people walking their dogs, and all those things kind of ground us and make us a lot more attentive. And so in my own kind of research, I've seen these exact things, just like the actual research is saying. Okay, so what is ecotherapy? So ecotherapy is basically the applied idea of how do we connect and reconnect and get nurtured by nature and then nurture nature back. So ecotherapy is like a big umbrella term, and it can mean a lot of things. So now I have people who tell me, well, I'm not really an outside door person. Although I usually convince them. I had a student that was so not into the outdoors, but she liked me, and she came to my classes, and then she just kind of it grew on her, and we had a couple of desensitizing experiences where a bug crawled over her, or something was on her paper, and she was able to kind of breathe through it, and be okay with it. And with time, it grew on her. But I don't know about the bugs, but the being outside part was fun. But ecotherapy can be so many different things. And often when I do talks, people ask me well, I'm doing this. Is this right? Well, probably it is. It's not a scripted thing. It's not like CBT where we have a real scripted kind of way of which we do things. It can be a bunch of different things, and it really should be, and maybe not should, but if what you're passionate about, right? So I have a friend who's a gardener, and so for her, horticultural therapy is just her jam, and that's what she does with her clients. For me, I'm more of a hiker, and so I take my clients into our parks here, and we take walks. It could be animal-assisted therapy. It could be wilderness therapy, which is how I started in this field many, 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 many years ago. It could be all of these things. So we'll talk a little bit about all of that. So horticulture therapy is one of the most popular kind of therapeutic interactions, and it obviously incorporates people and plants. And it can range from any kind of passive appreciation to gardens to actual gardens. So, horticulture therapy itself dates back to Socrates, but it didn't really become a scientific pursuit until more the 18th century, where people started kind of researching and documenting how people feel when kind of gardening when they're not well, right? So a lot of the science behind how gardening affects the mind and brain is still a little bit of a mystery, but we do know that it reduces stress, it calms the nerves, it decreases kind of cortisol and the stress response, and it improves our mental health. Even getting the dirt into our fingers and our, there's some scientific benefits to that too in terms of the bacteria. There's a lot of things you can do with gardening. I mean, you can just be super creative about this. You can see in one of the pictures, somebody created a sensory garden, and so the kids can go and kind of explore all their different senses while walking through the garden. Horticulture therapy has been wonderful in prison settings and helping people kind of connect and get some time outside and to be grounded and peaceful. I have a friend who has she gardens with her clients, and they will start with a seed, and every week she has a garden in her backyard, and they water together and they weed together. And while they do that, they actually have the therapeutic process. So there's lots of different ways that you can do it, and kind of the sky's the limit to that. Green exercise is another readily available, free therapy with no obvious side effects. I suppose one of the things we'll talk about when we get to ethics and stuff is to just, there's so many ethical considerations that you have to think about when you go out into nature with your clients. We'll get there. But for most of us, the green exercise, just for our own self-care, can be done almost at any time. And research does show that kind of that acute short-term exposure to outdoors, even non-rigorous. We don't have to run if we don't want to. Not my jam, but for some people that's very beautiful and helpful. But you can a nice stroll in the woods, and you can see the research says it affects as little as 5 minutes. And for younger people, you can experience improvements in self-esteem. Some of us might improve mood. So all green spaces are effective kind of improving mental health. And that could be urban green spaces as well if you don't have access to a natural park or a bigger space. It could be just sitting in a park in your urban environment. And that's another thing that's really important, is making sure that we have safe and accessible green spaces for everyone. Something that the Children in Nature Network for sure is really involved with. It could be a farm, it could be a wild habitat or a forest. And actually they say that water, or being next to water, has some of the greatest effect. They call it the blue mind. There's a book called Blue Mind that explores all the scientific kind of amazing things about being near water. Streams or lakes or oceans, or I don't know if you guys feel that way, but I know I feel good when I'm sitting next to a peaceful body of water. Animal-assisted therapy. I mean, some of the naysayers for the natural world, I ask, well, do you have they typically have a beloved pet, and that alone can be, but I'm saying, ecotherapy right there. And you all probably know this, but animal-assisted therapy is a type of therapy that involves animals and as a form of the treatment. And the idea, of course, is to improve mood, cognitive functioning. But one of the things that ecotherapists and ecopsychologists really think about is that it's not using the animal, just like we don't use the natural world, but it's beneficial for the animal as well. And so, if an animal is stressed or whatever, then that's like using and not like a mutually beneficial relationship. So it's just something important to think about. Equine therapy, for example, can be super powerful, because for anyone who's worked with horses know that they can sense your mood. And so for a lot of people I work with a farm here near my town that works with veterans, and typically they're tense and there's a lot of PTSD. And so part of the work is just having to calm their mind, calm their body so that they can interact with the horses, which is completely therapeutic. And of course, it's nonverbal, which is really powerful. And Temple Grandin, I'm sure you all know, talks a lot about how people who don't have maybe the same cognitive ability, or they have less ability or inclination to communicate verbally, have a lot easier time relating to animals because of just that. The nonverbal and the powerful interactions one can have from an animal. There's no judgment. it's unconditional positive regard. It's really like just, all love and empathy, and that can really help people who might not be able to otherwise verbalize how they feel. So a beautiful practice. And I would tell you that if you're going to do animal-assisted therapy, obviously there's trainings in that, and that's super important to be able to do.
Sorry, Dr. Delaney, quick question. What was the book name for the water book? Blue
Mind.
Blue Mind. Thank you.
Blue Mind. I'm looking on my bookshelf to see if I have it, but I think it's actually in my other office. So, but
just had someone ask, so I'm sure that'll be
no problem.
More for them.
Yes. So wilderness therapy is another powerful interaction. Using the wild and remote places is a really powerful way to like be connected and rekindle that deep connection that we have with the natural world. That's how I got started in this work. 20 years ago, I used to work for Outward Bound, and I worked for a couple other organizations that took kids out into the wilderness for 30 to 60 days. And the transformative change, it was just physically and mentally, it was just so powerful to watch. But I encourage people to get a little bit of a wilderness experience. It doesn't mean that you have to, immerse yourself in a wild place. It might just be sitting for an hour in silence, without distraction. And there's research out there that's saying that just as little as 3 days actually in the wilderness can have significant change. So if it's something that you're interested in doing, it doesn't mean that you have to go out, for a week or 2 weeks or 30 days. They call it the 3-day effect, that there's research that supports that. And there's a terrific, and I think I talk about it later, a book. There's a woman named Florence Williams that wrote a book called The Nature Fix, which I absolutely love, and I highly recommend. It's very readable. It's not technical. It's infused with all these amazing stories. But she also did an Audible book. So it's not a written book, it's Audible. So there's tons of like really amazing like Audible pieces, obviously, like you can hear the water and everything, called The 3-Day Effect. That's what the Audible book is called. Florence Williams, highly recommend it. So, and she talks a lot about wilderness therapy and how it can be a wonderful place for pure kind of distraction from modern society in a way to really just make that connection. My students and I actually are, assuming we're going to come out of this and be able to interact again, but my students and I are going on a 7-day wilderness trip in a year to Utah. It's going to be awesome. I got a year to get in shape, so we're going to work on that. But that's going to be part of I have an ecotherapy certificate program at my university, and that's the piece I'm adding, this kind of real intense wilderness, not intense, it doesn't have to be intense, hard, but just, fully encompassing wilderness experience.
Wow.
Okay.
I love it.
I know. I can't wait.
Yeah.
The other piece that I love talking about is what people call ecofeminism, and it really links the idea of feminism and ecology. And ecofeminists argue that the kind of Western paternalism and anthropocentrism, which is like human focused and human first, right, way of looking at things, led to kind of this harmful split between nature and our culture. And the movement kind of sees the connection between the dominance of nature and the exploitation of women. And when you think about that, what do we call nature but Mother Nature? And when we describe Mother Nature, we use a lot of terms that we also maybe are more typical when we talk about women or feminism, like caring and nurturing or giving, but then also things like unpredictable or something that needs to be controlled. And so ecofeminism really links those two kind of concepts, and there's lots of beautiful writings and interesting pieces about it if it's something that people want to explore and read more about. So like I talked about earlier, I just wrote a piece about this for a magazine called kind of Eco Grief. It's not anything that I've came up with. I mean, this is a term that people are talking about. This really resonated with me because as a kid, I didn't really understand it, but I just felt like something was wrong. I don't know how else to explain it. Like, even when I would get gifts, like, I would feel like like overwhelmed. And I kind of understand it obviously a lot more now, in that, you know, you just feel like you're watching the earth hurt and die around you. And sometimes it feels overwhelming, or like you're helpless. And that's what, you know, some people call this eco grief or climate stress. When you witness kind of the loss of land or species, or you're trying to talk to somebody who's a climate denier, or just doesn't believe in, you know, the impact of climate change, or people that just buy it more, or, you know, need bigger. So that personally, to me, is something that I feel very strongly about. And I think it's just important to know that that can be overwhelming too. And so figuring out how you can manage your own kind of climate stress or eco grief in your own way. When I love what Joanna Macy talks about. And Joanna Macy is an author and teacher. She's a scholar of Buddhism and systems thinking and deep ecology. And she's been doing this amazing work for a really long time. She has about 13 different books, which, you know, any of which I'd recommend. But she talks about how to kind of, her 3-part prescription for eco-sanity, right? And what she says is, like, we hold action, or we resist the bad, and we do good. So that's your activism piece, right? So whether that's locally or even bigger, it could be something in your town or your community or in your little space, or maybe even being involved on a bigger scale with a national movement. Some of the young people right now, like Greta Thunberg, just so inspiring, and that could be something you can get involved in. She talks about also then this shift in consciousness, which is what you can do for yourself, you know, and you can really define that for yourself as whether that's eco-spirituality or your own spirituality or yoga, or something that's intellectual, perhaps studying. That's what she calls that piece, the shift in consciousness, and then also some structural change, just creating the good. So it could be gardening, it could be doing ecotherapy, it could be holding a vision of where we're going, where we want to be. That's the feel-good part of this work. But what she talks about is, like, you have to keep it just like that ecological circle. Like, you have to keep things in balance. So if you lean too far in one, you're missing kind of the full piece. So what I've seen, and recently I did a talk at my own campus with a bunch of different scientists and people talking about, you know, the changes in the climate, and they all were so stressed, right? I mean, I was the only therapist in the room, so I know you guys could get this. And these scientists were all they're all in their head, and their faces are really tense. And I was like, whoa, everybody needs to breathe out, you know? And, like, to me, like, they were all in that circle holding action, right? So they weren't doing anything to help them, you know, either their consciousness or, you know, whatever maybe they weren't doing enough to make themselves feel good. So they were, like, leaning really heavy on that one piece, which we need, right? But they need to take care of themselves. We all know that, right, in our self-care, so that we can do the work together and not burn out. So that's just something to think about it. So if you get stuck in your activism or whatever it might be, or if you're stuck in yoga world and you're not really doing the other things, you know, you might be okay, but you need to go there. All right, let's talk about ecotherapy with children. This is one of my favorite things to do. I love taking my kids and my clients outside. It's really a natural fit for kids. They're just totally born to do this work. They love getting dirty. It's, like, not a big deal for them. I warn my parents before I bring my kids out. I'm like, their shoes are going to get dirty. Their pants are going to get dirty. Like, are you okay with that? And usually are, right? But you can utilize the natural world in all different ways. Sensory play. You could even do, like, heavy work, like we do with our sensory kids. You can do all kinds of grounding exercises outside. You can even do sand play outside, nature art activities. I just take some of my kids outside and we build stuff with sticks. I mean, I mean, I had one kid, we went back to the same place every week, and every week we just kept building, but it was his little space in the natural world. And because he was busy and moving and feeling good, you know, he was talking and talking and talking, and I got dirty too. And I think they love that. I mean, I think kids really look to adults to be kids too sometimes, and we can get stuck in our little adult worlds. And it's good for an adult to get dirty and in the dirt and play with the kids. And so there's plenty of things you can do with kids in the natural world. Another concept I love, and I do this with my clients, is the 7 factors of eco-wellness. My friend Ryan Reese created this in terms of his research. And so thinking about your own practice too, you know, do you have a strong working knowledge of ecotherapy? When you think about doing work with ecotherapy, we do above and beyond informed consent. So in my informed consent talks a lot about my work outside and understanding some of the implications that might come with. I ask my clients about allergies and medical conditions and that sort of thing. And I get all that in my informed consent. And before we go anywhere, we have those discussions. He talks about honoring a client's nature over worldview, so what the natural world means to them, having a deep kind of understanding and connection with them about that, and really kind of understanding their worldview, their natural worldview, just like we would with other worldviews that they might have. Protection of confidentiality is important when we do this work. I have conversations with my clients. I tend to use the same couple of trails or places that we go, and inevitably we'll come into other people, or we'll walk by other people. And so we have conversations beforehand of, like, say we ran into somebody that we know, like, how would my client want me to be introduced to my friend or my coworker? What would those conversations look like? How comfortable they are. I haven't had any issues yet, but it's just, again, it's a conversation that we have in advance. And then sometimes, obviously, then we, you know, if there's something that we're talking about that's, you know, either intense or something that we usually the conversation like slows down until the people pass, and then we can pick up the conversation. And that's good and that's bad. Sometimes, you know, you could be right at the heat of the moment or having this kind of intense conversation with the client, but it does give us a place to kind of breathe and then think. And typically, I haven't had any problems, you know, picking up the conversation. Being clear with clients about the clinical intent of the nature-based therapy and client advocacy. So again, I really talk about that kind of the reciprocity with nature, and I help my clients kind of reconnect with nature. And then having access to safe spaces. Again, it's really important. I know my trails. I've walked them a bunch of times before I take anybody out there. I bring with me a bag with some basic first aid kits. I have water always. I have a cell phone, and I don't go very far. And I always watch the weather and make sure that, you know, I know in advance. And if the weather doesn't look good at all, then we might do our work inside. Speaking of inside, that's another thing you can do if you are working. I know a lot of people, especially interns, they might not have the opportunity to go outside all the time. My interns, for example, they always tell me, oh gosh, you know, I really want to, but my space or my internship doesn't want me to go outside for liability reasons. And so you can bring nature inside, and it's called this biophilic design, and there's lots of research around that too. And so high quality natural lighting, window views, including natural elements such as plants or colors or scenes in your office. And there's been research that shows that improves mood and concentration as well. So something to think about, ways that you can naturize your office space. So this is for me, I mean, my passion is bringing ecotherapy into the classroom. And so these are a bunch of my students in different places. And so my current research really is incorporating ecotherapy in the classroom. And what I found is that the themes that have emerged from my data is that the students feel connected to the instructor, the students feel connected to each other in a different way, a more intense way. They find connection to nature. You know, they have emotional reactions in nature. They have a heightened awareness of their own mood and their senses. They tend to feel better, at the end of class. And so a lot of them have said to me, gosh, like this fall semester, I tend to be outside the whole time. And in the spring, because of the cold and that sort of thing, we tend not to be inside as much. And they're like, I feel different in the fall. Like I feel better. And I too feel the same way. And then I want to circle back to this concept of, reciprocity too in the natural world. And Linda Bazell talks about this a lot in her work on her books, which Craig Chelquist on ecotherapy. And she talks about level 1 and level 2 ecotherapy. And just to introduce the idea, what she means level 1, which is what maybe a lot of us are doing, where it's just human-centered nature therapy. Whether we go into nature, we get benefits from its healing powers. But it misses this critical piece, again, she talks about, and that's what she says, level 2 ecotherapy, which is what she calls the circle of reciprocal healing. And again, that expands upon our relationship with nature, not just in using it, but then also nurturing back. So how do we do that? And that's just what we have to kind of just cultivate in ourselves, our own kind of ecological plan, or whatever kind of self-care. So for me, I volunteer with my county parks, and on Wednesday when we were not, sheltered in place, we would go and I would do a lot of work in the county park trail maintenance, and that's my way of level 2 ecotherapy. My friend does a ton of work with her clients. She actually brings her clients out on paddle boards, and they do the work on a paddle. It's awesome. I think I have a picture and these slides. And she always brings a bag, and they take 3 for the sea. So while they're out, they take 3 pieces of trash. I have people that tell me that all the time. Like, I could go collect trash, and I could come back with a huge bag. That too, again, when you think about Joanna Macy's circle, you don't want to be so burdened by it. So, take 3 for the sea, or take 3. Just take what you can, and don't be overwhelmed by it. But again, it's that level 2 is what you're going to develop in your own self. So just again, ethical considerations, we started to touch on this, but just to bring it back home. So informed consent, which includes kind of language for outdoor therapies, and that is in my informed consent. I check with your insurance carrier or liability insurance, get additional insurance if you can, have those conversations. And maybe if you're in an agency, make sure you talk, if you're going to take your clients outside or do this work, what might it look like? Be prepared, know your office, right? You don't want to be out with a client, not know where you are. Screen your clients for all things, health, allergies, fears, comfort level. And you want to protect yourself and you want to protect the client. I had a student actually who had a really significant allergy to lemons or citrus, right? Who knew? We were outside, but somebody sprayed a bug spray that was citrus-based, and she just had a total allergic reaction. And so I learned then before class, I just collect all that information just so we know and we're prepared. Again, I carry a phone, a first aid kit, a water. If you can, get first aid training, depending on the work you're going to do, for sure. And if you're doing animal assisted work or some other thing, there's other, I know in the United States, there's certifications that you get that can give you above and beyond kind of experience in that before you go out and do the work. So can I be an ecotherapist? And the simple answer is yes, you can. You don't need to be an expert in ecology or forestry or environmental science. You just need to know who you want to work with, picking a suitable place, and checking on your paperwork and your insurance, and talking to your clients about the how and the when and the why. And oh yeah, there's my friend on her paddleboard and her dog. So asking specific questions in the intake about, again, clients' connection to nature, making use of nature as a metaphor. Nature and metaphors, it's like a beautiful marriage. I mean, you can do so much work with, and just naturally happens, one time I was with a client and she's walking really fast, she's type A and going. And this little centipede came by. And she stopped, and she looked at him. And I'm sure he was going a million miles an hour, with his millions of legs. But to us, he looked really slow. And she was like, whoa, I really need to slow down, So things like that happen all the time in nature. You can assign nature-based homework to clients. One of the things I love to do is the special place assignment, and just being rooted and grounded in a place that makes you feel good, and then going back to that place as a site for sanity or relaxation. My clients that I hike with actually go back to the hiking trail sometimes to hike it. I mean, that's their office where they feel peace, so sometimes they go back to experience that just on their own. You can choose something in nature to represent you and bring it home with you. You can bring nature into your office. You can do like sensory work by bringing the nature into your office and leaving it in a bowl on your desk and letting people touch things. You can help clients understand their own kind of ecological self-care and the reciprocal ways of taking care of nature, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then in the interest of time, I just love this. My friend just made this, how to be an ecotherapist, believe in the innate and healing power of nature, have your own practice of getting outside regularly, climb trees, plant seeds, always proceed with caution, let nature lead, know your parks and public access spaces, be prepared, notice everything, point out the magical happenings in nature, improvise, cool down, stay loose, learn to watch snails, open up, dive in, be free, stay curious and flexible, be engaged with the present moment, breathe, take body breaks, keep it simple like nature does, smile, get wet, and hug trees. I love it. She's the woman that does the paddleboarding. And just the 2 other slides, these are some of my favorite books. And then, of course, this is my book.
Amazing. Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Delaney. We have so many questions that are coming in.
Oh, good. Great.
Yeah. Got some really good. So thank you so much for a great presentation. I think I needed this, just like an hour where I could think about getting outside and hiking and everything. So thank you for
100%, yeah.
From just myself.
We need it. Well, really need it now, I think, for sure.
Definitely. So if you don't mind, we'll maybe just dive right in.
Go for it.
I'll throw a really quick one at you to start. Can you please refresh us on what that Audible book was that you had mentioned?
Yes. It's called The 3-Day Effect.
Perfect. 3-Day Effect.
By Florence Williams. It's awesome. I hope you all, she's amazing, and I hope you all listen to it. It's 6 hours of just, it's a great way to kind of take a walk or whatever.
So I'm from a really big outdoorsy family as well. I'm from out in Alberta. We grew up in the mountains, and we're pretty much out there every weekend doing whatever we could. And my brother is, I'm a social worker. My brother wants to be a guide. And so this really, really spoke to me. But I'd never in my life heard of something called a forest school. And someone is asking about that. Have you heard of anything about forest schools?
Yes. That's another thing that I actually didn't, one of the things I forgot to mention is forest bathing, right? Shinrin no Yoku, which is really popular in Japan and South Korea, and they're doing tons of research about it. And basically the research is that spending time in trees is like biologically and good for you, and also obviously mentally good for you. And so the people doing the research have been studying like all the scientific effects, on blood pressure and, changes in your brain, all those things. And so forest bathing is when you actually do a meditative walk through nature, usually through a forest. And there are forest guides that do that. And you can get actually trained as a forest bathing. But forest schools are really cool too. And they're places where kids go and just are in nature all day, and that's where they do their learning. They're popping up here in the United States a little bit. I had a friend who sent her kid to forest school, and so it was super cool. I mean, he had this big yellow jumpsuit, and he just got in it, and he came home and it was like covered in dirt. I mean, they did their lessons outside. They were prepared for the weather. Just full on sensory awesomeness.
I love that. Yeah. And so one of the things about the CSW webinars is to explore topics that you may not have really thought about. So, you may not be someone who's going to become an ecotherapist, but you may be using some of the things that we are talking about right now to incorporate it into your practice. I mean, there are a lot of people I'm seeing that are like, oh, I'm so on board now, I'm gung-ho. But for any of you that are attending that are just wanting to take some of these tips and tricks, like know that you can the things that we've discussed here and really try and incorporate them into your practice. So that leads me into actually one of the next questions that we had, which was if you had any resources that you knew about in terms of informed consent and confidentiality for practicing in nature.
So that's a good question. And I recently did an eco-psychology certificate with the specific university with Linda Bazell herself. And so we asked that too. There's nothing like it in the United States, and I don't know about Canada, but there's nothing actually super formal. I mean, you don't get an actual certificate in ecotherapy or eco-psychology. And so in my informed consent, I read to my clients, I am an ecotherapist, and this is what this means, because obviously for most people that they don't know what that means, why I think it's important. And I talk about the scientific reasons and the research behind our connection to nature. And then I ask them, I have an office too, where I see clients, but I always do my intakes in the office first, and we have conversations about, how their own kind of connection to the natural world and how they would feel about going out and doing our work outside. So far, I hadn't had anybody say no, but I also think they come to me because this is something that I publicize that I do. And then in my informed consent, I talk about, in our work outside, we'll try to, be as cautious and careful as possible. Things might happen. You might trip. You might get hurt. That they're aware and take kind of accountability that's part of the kind of process, or the initial that they know that they're aware of that.
Yeah,
and
you
again,
had mentioned
and
whatnot. So having the conversations with not even just your clients, but if you are working with children, with their parents and whatnot as well.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, so fun. The individual who asked about the forest schools says that they're actually all over Ontario. So that's great news. I love that.
I love it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's super cool.
I know. And now
of course, I'm dragging my kids out. I'm dragging my kids outside right now, and they're like, oh, so it's like, I'm no rocket science, it's hard sometimes. Our kids are so wired today, and I don't you guys, but we're all online school right now. And so so I'm like, gotta pull away and try to, and then once they're there, I can't get them to come home. So go figure. Yeah.
Okay. So, this is maybe more of a broader comment that you could hopefully maybe reflect on, but I know you had touched on it a little bit, but how have you seen this benefit someone who has fears of something like wasps or anything like that? How have you seen this approach help while mitigating the reason that they're maybe coming to see a therapist, but also the kind of compounding other factors of fear of bugs or rain or thunderstorms, whatever it is? What have you seen in your experience?
Yeah, and first of all, this is not for everybody, right? So you're going to have clients that they could have had traumatic experiences in nature in whatever capacity. And so that this might not be for them at all, right? This could be that, or you could introduce it slowly, like we do, with other things in the office by bringing nature in. But again, I think that's why I particularly do, I have a kind of that nature intake too, where I ask specific questions in my intake about their the connection to nature, their earliest experiences in nature. What was nature like for them as a child? And that way I get an understanding too about some of that history. So I had a client who was deeply afraid of bugs, and it was hard, in the beginning. We really had to kind of take our time and breathe through things and that sort of thing. and I don't know if it ever really went away, but it got easier for her for sure. It was something that she really talked about. My other friend who does the paddleboarding tells a story of a young girl with tons and tons of anxiety. And the paddleboarding was so amazing because she had to be so calm and out of her head and in her body just to stand up on the paddleboard. That at one point, a turtle jumped on the paddleboard, and she couldn't freak out, right? Because she had to stay upright. And so she really had to like calm herself. I mean, normally, like, you wouldn't be, maybe you and I wouldn't be afraid of turtles, but this young lady was like petrified of that. Anything kind of could tap off her anxiety. She literally had to breathe her way through and stay upright on the paddleboard. And then the turtle left, and she was just so amazed with herself for her capacity to like, it was like, proof in the pudding right there that she had the capacity to do the work. So those are the kind of things. I mean, you have to kind of be prepared in nature for the unexpected, right? And so, I mean, especially with wilderness work, I mean, nature can be really scary. And so there's definitely dangers and something to think about too. I mean, especially with the weather, if the weather can change, I mean, you just don't want to be far out where you can't turn back. All those things are really important to think about before you go out and do the work. We don't get snow anymore in New Jersey, but I know you guys do.
Yeah, weather can change quickly. I mean, even like I know it is true of Ontario as well, but especially out in the mountains in Alberta, like I've had it where I've had to have a raincoat, and then it started hailing, and then it's beautiful and sunny, and all in the like within like 4 hours,
Yeah, it's crazy.
So you have to be prepared, especially if you are, bringing other clients and whatnot onto that. And that's why I love when you said, have a first aid kit, have some water, really plan it out. There's obviously like I believe there's incredible benefits to working with clients in nature. And we've done other webinars on, equestrian and animal assisted therapies and other kinds. We haven't done one specifically like this, but of the benefits, but just being prepared and embracing the messiness as so good at. Another concept, actually, aside from the forest schools, was the Eco-Feminism that I haven't looked into. A lot of people are wondering if you can share a couple more potential resources. Even just, I did a quick Google search, and there is a lot out there. So for someone like who'd never heard of it, if that's you as well, you can Google it. Someone wanted to know where you got the photo on your slide.
I know. I don't know, actually. Maybe that's some kind of crazy copyright infringement.
Yeah.
Isn't that awesome? I know. Isn't it beautiful? I know. Yeah. There is a name down at the bottom. Oh, I love that. I love that photo.
Do you have any resources you'd like to share about ecofeminism?
Yeah, I mean, so in that, hold on, I'm just looking at my books. In this is the book with Theodore Rozek. This is the kind of the pioneering book. They have a beautiful chapter called "The Rape of the Well Maidens: Feminist Psychology and the Environmental Crisis," written by Mary Gomez, Gomes. And I know Mary Gomez, talks about this topic a lot. She's written a lot. Joanna Macy is just, a wonderful resource for that too. So they're out there. And once you go down kind of once you go down a little bit of like the researching names, they're all kind of interconnected, and you'll kind of, I don't have them on the tip of my tongue, but you'll find them.
Yeah. Sorry. Just for everyone, I do know your questions coming in, and I do see them. We're going to try and get through a couple more here, and I'm going to try and compile some of them. So thank you so much for engaging with this.
Then people can email me, if they want. I don't know if I can put my email up if that helps.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the chat if that, let me just see if I can figure it. Okay.
Or you can tell me here.
Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah, it's M. Delaney. M. Delaney at Monmouth, MONMOUTH.edu. Or Megan Delaney, PhD @gmail.com. Either one is fine.
Awesome. I'm going to put it up here while I get you and push it to our group for anyone to have your email. I'm going to ask you one more. We have time for probably one more question as well.
I'm not going anywhere, so nowhere to be.
I don't think our social workers really are either. One of the questions really good, actually. In Canada, we're seeing a lot of our parks actually close right now because of the pandemic. So we are seeing our governments that have taken the liberty of shutting down our parks. And that's mostly just the services. So just note that it really is mostly like the washrooms and whatnot. So trying to discourage people. Do you have any kind of like comments as to how we can encourage people to engage with this right now while the setting is a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, I just started a blog on psychology today called Nature is Nurture, and I just wrote about this last week on how I think the natural world can help us connect while also being socially distant. And I mean, just because we're outside, in the United States, they're talking about having people wear masks. I don't know if that's going to be the norm. But I have found in the parks that I've been, people have been very respectful of giving space, when walking and moving out of the way and letting people walk by. And I think we just have to be mindful of that. I know I saw on I think they got Zion National Park in the United States, that there was a picture of all these people crowded together. I mean, that's where this is my little bit of my fear is as the weather gets nicer, people are going to be going out more, and then more and more things will close. So I think we just all have to be, just super conscious of it. But also it could be just going in your backyard. Like next week, my kids are on spring break. And I'm lucky enough to have a little bit of woods in my backyard, and we're literally going to set up the tent and sleep out there one night. My 10-year-old really wants to. So, I mean, there's just little ways, getting involved in your little place and space, or if you're in an apartment, if you can put some, if you can grow some greens on your windowsill or what it might be, it just might help, make you feel a little better. It's hard.
A lot of the hardware stores are still open right now. So if you have a local home hardware store, you have a bunch of gardening materials there. I really do. Personally, I started a little arugula and like bean and basil garden the other day because I was feeling a little bit cagey in my house, and I wanted to start my garden as I normally do in the spring inside. So, I mean, there is the option, kind of like, I loved what you were saying about gardening, maybe trying to encourage some of our clients to play in the dirt, even if it's in their backyard. I did a nature scavenger hunt with my kids. I just wrote a simple, you have to find 3 different types of, pine cones, 3 different color leaves. I don't know, simple things like that. I just made a list, and my kids went and collected all those things, and even my 13-year-old, whatever, mom, did it. And and then we came, I know, right? I mean, who knew? And then afterwards we made a mandala with it, with all the things we collected. And that was kind of fun, So, I mean, nobody needs to be Martha Stewart here, right? But, whatever it is that, it's just a little fresh air and some sanity, I think is good. And it even might be, Sorry, I don't want to get anyone in trouble with the things that I'm saying. But no, the time's okay. Actually, I'm not worried about the time. It's that apparently there's some parks in some of our provinces in Canada here that if you get caught in a park, you'll be fined. So, just trying to be cautious
before you go.
Exactly. Yeah. And two, I mean, you can get outdoors and be outside. I know a lot of us live in urban centers, but I do have a yard and I have a backyard. So, I mean, even just that, the understanding that we need to be connecting with the natural world right now, maybe more than ever, I sometimes wonder.
one of the beautiful things about this, and I know you've probably been finding this, is that things have been healing, right? I know, like in Venice, the water is clear and the air is clear, and so like in a way, the earth is breathing while we're kind of taking a break, you know? So
yeah, like I think dolphins came back in Venice or something. I saw
I
it was
heard.
just incredible. Yeah,
Wild.
incredible. Mountain lions have taken over a town that I think it might be in Austria. I'm not 100% sure. You know, good. These kind of, to me, they feel like good news stories. A little bit.
I mean, even watching like nature shows on the TV. I mean, they even say even watching it digitally can actually make you feel good. So.
Oh, I feel that way too. Putting on a National Geographic. Actually, as well, if you're in Canada and you're housed up in your house watching Netflix, there's an amazing 5-part series called Life Below Zero. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It takes place in Alaska. Oh my goodness, incredible! It's
on my list.
Yeah. I really loved that when I watched it, because it really shows you how to get back out into nature and the benefits of subsistence living and whatnot. So if you're thinking about that,
cool.
Okay, maybe one more question.
Sure.
And then we will try and wrap up. And everyone, again, the peer-to-peer, if you joined us late, we have launched a peer-to-peer support group with the link in the resource section here. So please feel free to log on there and engage with us on Facebook for the peer-to-peer support group. And as always, you can engage with us on Twitter and whatnot. Oh man, everyone's saying that this was such an incredible presentation. And some people who are getting into the realm of ecotherapy with traumatized youth, wondering how you are so humble as you do it, because it's been very difficult.
It is really humbling. It's really humbling. It's beautiful work.
Yes. And one of them is actually, this is probably going to be our last question. It's about how clients want to be introduced if you do run into someone in public. So wondering how you feel and what are some ways that you could classify yourself if they don't want you to be called a therapist. If you can just provide some insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all depends too on what you have access to. Like for me, I tend to bring my clients into this natural space that's like it's not like a town park. You know what I mean? So I'd be less likely to run into, or my clients would be less likely to be running into people. But usually, they want to, a friend from work or, a colleague is usually what people will say. And then, again, I really haven't had any negative experiences, but it's something, and I know for rural people that live in more rural places where, everybody knows you're the therapist, right? So you might be out with a client, and that just might be something that you have to have a conversation with. Like, we're going to go outside my office, like people might see us walking, and are you comfortable with everybody knowing that you're with the town shrink, and then some people might be comfortable with that and some people might not. So it just, I know that can be, an issue, especially in smaller communities. But again, it's just being really receptive to your clients and their comfort level. Sometimes I sit at the beach I live near the beach, and sometimes we just go and sit. We bring chairs and sit. And I love the off season for that because, not a lot of people are there. We bundle up, we bring blankets, we bring cups of tea, and we just sit at the ocean when nobody's there. It's the best time to be there,
Yeah, I had it once actually, and for anyone who watches these knows that I do therapy myself as for myself, not as a therapist. Yeah. And I never forget when I first kind of started, as I started being a social worker, my first ever office with my therapist had no windows. And I felt so trapped, and I didn't really want to talk about a lot of things. So when I hear you say that you took like chairs and bundled up with some tea and sat on a beach, I can't even imagine how much more comfortable I would have felt talking about my big questions, my big social work questions in a space like that, as opposed to a tiny 4-wall office with no windows.
Yeah, and I find too, because I do a lot of walk and talk, is that when they're moving their body, like they're connected, right? So, again, we have to be careful with trauma and that sort of thing. But, for the clients that I tend to work with, that gets them a little bit out of their head, and they're moving through kind of physically through their things too.
Yeah.
Sometimes not staring at me too helps, right? If we're walking, it's a little less intimidating. I don't know.
We hear that all the time too, is that kind of like, is this idea of like how much gaze is too much versus too little, and right. So on and so on. You don't even think about how nature might completely change that whole issue.
Right. Totally. Okay. With kids, it's great. Kids love it. They don't want to sit on your couch. Oh my God, no, right? Works great.
Amazing. Okay, well, we're going to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much, Dr. Delaney. This has been, oh gosh, I needed this. It seems like a ton of our members needed as well. So thank you. I'm sure you'll probably be hearing from some of them. I hope so.
Good. I'll be glad to.
And again, Megan's, Dr. Delaney's book is in the resource section. We did do it for our book draw, and it was very highly sought out. So if you weren't someone to win that, then you can purchase it as well. We have more webinars coming at the CSW, so keep an eye on it. We'd love to talk about what's going on, but also talk about things like this, so that when we all get back into our normal swing of things, we have some. And for those students out there too who can't be in your practicum settings, please think about what we talked about today, and think about how you're going to incorporate it into your hopefully field placements or settings when you get back into them. So thank you so much.
So fun. Thank you.
Yeah, this was a great one. I'm really happy with it. So I'm going to end the webcast now. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Delaney. We hope you stay safe and healthy and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Same to you. Thank you.